40 acres of pine trees and silence. That's where my grandmother died alone. Her name was Hattie Burgess, 74 years old. She went to sleep one Tuesday night in that crumbling A-frame cabin she'd lived in for 40 years and just didn't wake up. The neighbors, if you can call someone a neighbor when they live 3 miles down a dirt road, they found her 2 days later when the porch light never came on. I got the call at school, third period. I was standing in front of 22 seventh graders trying to explain the Missouri Compromise, and my phone buzzed in my pocket, and somehow I already knew. I just knew. I excused myself into the hallway and answered, and Mrs. Dooley from the church said the words, and my knees gave out right there against the cinder block wall. Grandma Hattie wasn't just my grandmother, she was the only fixed point I had in this world. Every single weekend for 9 years, I drove 2 hours each way up that mountain. I brought her groceries. I swept her floors. I sat on that porch with her and shelled beans while she told me stories about my mother. Stories no one else alive could tell me. She knitted me this scarf the winter before she died, pale blue yarn, loose stitches because her hands were getting bad. I was wearing it at the funeral. I pressed it against my face and breathed her in one last time. Cedar and cinnamon and old coffee. That's what home smelled like. That's what gone smelled like. Marcus showed up 20 minutes late. My brother, 41 years old, tailored charcoal suit, rental car still ticking in the church parking lot. He hadn't spoken to Grandma in over 10 years. Not a phone call. Not a card at Christmas. Nothing. There'd been some falling out years back. Something about money he'd borrowed from her when his first development deal went south. Money he never paid back. Words that got said that couldn't get unsaid. Grandma never told me the details. She'd just go quiet when his name came up, look out at the tree line and change the subject. I think she missed him every single day and was too proud and too hurt to say so. He walked into that little country church like he was arriving at a zoning hearing, scanning the room, checking his phone. When the pastor talked about Hattie's kindness, about the quilts she donated to the shelter every winter, the way she'd drive her truck down the mountain in ice storms to bring soup to sick folks, Marcus was looking out the window, not at the mountains, at the land. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't measuring grief, he was measuring acreage. After the service, we stood in the gravel parking lot and he said the first words he'd spoken to me in 3 years. "So what's the property situation?" Not "I'm sorry," not "how are you holding up?" The property situation. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to shove him into that rental car and tell him to drive back to Nashville and never set foot on this mountain again. But I just stood there clutching that scarf, the pale blue yarn balled up in my fist, and I said nothing. Because screaming at Marcus had never changed Marcus, not once in 41 years. Then the lawyer showed up. Mr. Alderman, old man, bifocals, been handling wills and deeds in this county since before I was born. He pulled us both aside near the wrought iron fence that ran along the cemetery, cleared his throat like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth, and told us what he'd found. Or rather, what he hadn't found. Hattie never filed a formal will with my office, he said, adjusting those glasses and looking genuinely pained about it. I encouraged her to, more than once. She always said she'd handle it her own way. Without a filed will, Tennessee law is clear. The estate splits equally between her surviving descendants. That's you two. Marcus nodded once, quick, satisfied, like a man who'd just been told his offer was accepted. And my stomach dropped straight through the gravel, because I knew something neither of them knew. Every single Sunday, sitting on that porch with the mountains turning purple in the evening light, Grandma Hattie told me the same thing. She'd pat my hand with those rough, beautiful fingers, fingers that had quilted and gardened and held my face when I cried, and she'd say, "It's all written down, baby. They just gotta find it." There was a will, handwritten, hidden somewhere in that cabin. I looked at Marcus, standing there already doing the math in his head, already seeing bulldozers and lot lines where Grandma saw home. I looked at Mr. Alderman, shuffling his papers, ready to close the book on a woman who deserved so much more than an even split and a legal default. And I didn't say a word. I pulled up to Grandma Hattie's cabin at 9:30 on a grey Saturday morning, and the silence hit me before I even killed the engine. No screen door creaking open, No voice calling out, "That you, baby?" Just the wind pushing through the hickory trees and the faint ticking of my car cooling down in the gravel drive. I sat there a full minute before I could make myself go inside. The kitchen still smelled like her, that mix of wood smoke and cinnamon and the ghost of 100 cast-iron skillets. Her coffee percolator sat on the counter with yesterday's grounds still in it. No, not yesterday's. Last week's. Maybe longer. Nobody had cleaned it. Nobody had been here to clean it. I started with the Bible, that big leather King James she kept on the side table by her recliner. I flipped through every page, shook it by the spine. Prayer cards and old bulletins fluttered out like dead leaves, but no will. Then the bedroom closet, shoeboxes full of photographs, receipts from 1987, a savings passbook from a bank that doesn't exist anymore. I dug through every box, ran my hands along the top shelf, checked behind the hanging dresses that still held the shape of her shoulders. Nothing. I stood in the hallway and pressed my palms against my eyes. "Where'd you put it, Grandma?" I said it out loud like she might answer. She didn't, but something pulled me back to the kitchen. The Dutch oven. That big old Lodge cast iron she'd had since before I was born. The one that sat on the bottom shelf because it was too heavy for her to lift anymore. I crouched down and wrapped both hands around the handle and slid it out. The lid was so heavy it scraped when I lifted it. And there it was. A single envelope, unsealed, sitting at the bottom of that pot like it had been waiting for me. I pulled it out with shaking fingers. Hattie's handwriting, that beautiful trembling cursive that leaned hard to the right, covered 2 pages of lined paper, dated 3 months before she died. Notarized, witnessed by someone named Darlene Fitch, who I later learned was the woman who cut Hattie's hair at the salon in Decatur. She left it all to me, the cabin, the 11 acres, and a lockbox, location described in careful detail, containing $82,000 in United States savings bonds. $82,000. I sat down on that kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I held those pages against my chest, and I could not breathe. Not because of the money, because of what it meant. She knew. She knew Marcus would come circling. She knew nobody else would fight for this place. So she spent her last clear months making sure it was mine, legal and proper, signed and stamped, and she hid it in the one place only someone who loved her kitchen would ever think to look. I took photos of every page, both sides, the notary stamp, the date. I saved them to my phone and emailed copies to myself. Then I put the will back in the envelope, set it back in the Dutch oven, and slid the pot onto the shelf. I didn't want anyone saying I tampered with anything. I wanted the lawyer to come here Monday morning and pull it out himself, on the record, untouched. That was my plan, clean and proper, the way Grandma would have done it. But then I made the call. I don't know why I called Marcus. That's not true. I do know. I called him because he's my brother. Because some stupid, stubborn part of me still believed that if I just told him the truth, if I just said Grandma made her wishes clear, he'd respect it. He'd grieve like a normal person and let it be. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Marcus, I found Grandma's will. She had one after all. It's notarized, it's dated, it's legal." Nothing. She left the property to me, and there's a lockbox. She set aside savings bonds. She wanted me to have them. More nothing, but it wasn't empty silence. It was full. It was the sound of someone doing math. "Marcus, I'm not trying to fight with you. I just wanted you to hear it from me before I take it to the lawyer on Monday. I thought that was the right thing to—" "Yeah," he said, "just that. Yeah." And he hung up. I stood there holding the phone against my ear for another 10 seconds, listening to dead air, and my stomach went cold. I told myself it was fine. I told myself the will was safe, the cabin was locked, Monday was only 2 days away. I drove home. I made tea I didn't drink. I went to bed early. Hattie had a security camera mounted under the eave by the front porch. She'd installed it 2 years back after someone broke into a neighbor's barn up the road. Simple little thing, motion activated, footage saved to a cloud service she barely understood. I'd set it up for her myself one Sunday afternoon. That camera would later show Marcus's truck pulling onto the gravel at 2:14 a.m. Headlights off. He stepped out with a flashlight in one hand and Grandma's spare key in the other. He walked up those porch steps like he owned the place. He went inside alone, and the front door closed. But I pulled up to Grandma Hattie's cabin Monday morning, and I knew before I even cut the engine. I can't explain it. The air felt different. The front porch looked the same, the wind chimes still hung where she'd put them. But something was off the way a room is off after someone's gone through it and tried to put everything back. I turned the key, stepped inside, and there it was, faint, almost nothing, but I caught it. Cologne. Not Hattie's lavender, not the cedar and dust I'd breathed in on Saturday. Someone else had been in this house. I went straight for the kitchen. The Dutch oven sat on the stove right where I'd left it. I grabbed both handles and lifted the lid, and I already knew what I'd find, but knowing doesn't prepare you. That hollow iron bowl staring back at me empty. No envelope, no will. Just black cast iron and nothing. I stood there holding that lid for I don't know how long. 5 seconds, maybe 10. Long enough for the weight of it to stop meaning anything at all. Then I dropped it on the counter and ran to the bedroom. Hattie had shown me the lockbox under the floorboards 2 summers ago. Pulled me in there, shut the door, got down on her knees at 79 years old and said, "This is between me and you, baby, not Marcus. You understand me?" I'd nodded. She'd shown me the savings bonds, neat as church bulletins, stacked inside a fireproof box bolted under the planks. I saw the scratches before I even knelt down. Fresh gouges in the wood where someone had worked a crowbar or a flathead screwdriver, prying up boards that had been sealed for years. The dust on the floor was smeared in wide arcs. I pulled the loose plank away and looked down into the cavity. Empty. Box gone, bonds gone, all of it. I sat on Hattie's bedroom floor with my back against her bed, and I called Marcus. He picked up on the 3rd ring, casual, like it was any other Monday. "Hey Joe, what's up?" "I'm at the cabin," I said. "The will is gone. The bonds are gone." Silence. Then, and I will never forget the performance, he said, "Will? What will?" "Marcus." "Jolene, I don't know what you're talking about. Grandma never wrote a will, you know that. I held it in my hands on Saturday. I told you about it. You told me you found something. I figured you were emotional. You've been emotional since the funeral, and honestly, the savings bonds are gone too, Marcus. Someone pried up the floorboards." Another pause, shorter this time, and when he spoke again, the fake concern was gone. What replaced it was something smooth and settled, like a man leaning back in a leather chair. "Grandma never wrote a will, Jolene. You're imagining things. Let's just split everything fair and square through probate." He hung up. I sat there with the phone pressed against my ear, listening to dead air. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness, from something deeper than that, something that starts in the chest and spreads outward until your whole body feels like a clenched fist. He had me. I knew it and he knew it. The original will was destroyed by now, probably ashes in his fireplace. The bonds were in his possession, and a man with Marcus's money and Marcus's lawyers could drag a probate challenge out for years. 5 years, 7, until I was broke and exhausted and gave up. I could show a judge the photographs on my phone, but without the original document, without the physical will, Marcus would call them fabrications. He'd call me emotional. He'd call me confused by grief. And some judge who didn't know Hattie from a stranger might believe him. I almost broke right there on that bedroom floor. But then my eyes drifted to the corner of the room, past the bed, past the dresser with Hattie's reading glasses still sitting on top, to the closet door that didn't hang quite right, the one with the cracked paint along the bottom hinge. And I remembered something Marcus never knew, something Hattie told me on the same day she showed me those bonds, standing right in this room with her hand on my shoulder, her voice low and steady, like she was giving me instructions for a war she knew was coming. I stopped shaking, I wiped my face, and I stood up, and then I saw the closet door. That cracked hinge Hattie never fixed because she said it reminded her to stay sharp, and something clicked in my brain so hard I swear I heard it. See, my grandmother grew up during times when people took what wasn't theirs and called it survival. She didn't trust banks, she didn't trust locks, and she sure as hell didn't trust family she hadn't tested. So about 6 years back, she pulled me aside on the porch one evening, cicadas going crazy, the smell of her coffee still hanging in the air, and she pointed up at this birdhouse mounted under the eave. Hand-painted, little blue roof. Looked like something from a church craft fair. She leaned in close, the way she did when she was about to tell you something that mattered, and she said, "Baby, that ain't for the birds." Inside that birdhouse was a solar-powered trail camera, the kind hunters use, motion-activated, infrared, recorded everything straight to an SD card. Hattie had bought it after someone tried to break into her shed one winter. She showed me how to pop the bottom panel off, slide the card out, and check the footage. She made me practice twice, and then she held my hands and looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're the only one who knows about this. Keep it that way." I kept it that way. I walked outside, hands still shaking from that phone call with Marcus. I dragged a patio chair under the eave, reached up and popped the bottom panel. The little SD card was right there, same spot. Still recording after all this time because the solar panel kept it fed. I slid it into my phone. And there he was. Infrared footage, clear as glass. Timestamp, Monday, 2:14 a.m. Marcus walking up the porch steps carrying a crowbar. He wasn't even trying to hide his face. Why would he? He thought nobody was watching. He thought Hattie was just a paranoid old woman with a cabin full of junk and folk remedies. I watched him pry the front door open. 20 minutes later, he walked back out. Metal lockbox under one arm, a stack of papers in his other hand. He tossed the crowbar into the bed of his truck like it was nothing, like he'd just finished a chore, and drove off into the dark. I played it 3 times, and by the 3rd time, I wasn't crying anymore. Now, some people would have called the police right then, and I understand that impulse, I do. But I knew something about Marcus that Marcus didn't know about himself, that man could not help being greedy. You give him an inch, he'll measure the whole yard and try to sell it to a developer by Friday. And every single thing he did while thinking he'd gotten away with it. That was another cookie out of the jar, and I was counting. So I called him back, and I made my voice sound tired, small, defeated. "Marcus, I've been thinking. You're right, I was emotional. There's no will. Let's just sell the cabin. Your company can handle the listing, right?" The way that man's voice changed, you would have thought I handed him a winning lottery ticket. "Jolene, that is the smartest thing you've said all week. I'll get the paperwork going first thing tomorrow." "Okay," I said. "I trust you." 3 words. "I trust you," and he swallowed them whole without even chewing. I hung up the phone and sat back down on that porch, right next to Hattie's little blue birdhouse. The camera was still in there, still watching, same as it had been every single night since she mounted it. Hattie always said she kept one eye open even when she was sleeping. Turns out she kept one open even after she was gone. Marcus was already making calls, already talking to developers, already spending money in his head that didn't belong to him. Every listing agreement, every email, every handshake, he was building his own case and didn't even know it. He thought he was selling a dead woman's property. What he was really doing was showing a future courtroom exactly who he was. And me? I sat on that porch and I smiled for the first time in days, because he had no idea what was coming. But Hattie did. Hattie always did. 3 weeks. That's how long I let him run. And Lord, did Marcus run. He ran hard and fast and blind, the way Grandma Hattie always said greedy people do. She had a saying for it: "Let a greedy man run, baby. He'll build his own fence." I didn't understand that when I was 9 years old sitting on her porch shelling peas. I understood it now. I watched every bit of it. His Instagram stories, him standing on Grandma's land in a sport coat, pointing at the tree line like he'd planted those oaks himself. A drone video of the property with soft piano music underneath it, captioned, "Exclusive listing, premium acreage." He hired surveyors, had glossy brochures printed on heavy cardstock with a rendering of what some resort developer planned to build there. A luxury lodge with hot tubs where Hattie's garden used to be. He spent his own money, thousands. Marketing fees, surveyor costs, a professional photographer who probably charged $800 to take pictures of a cabin Marcus didn't own, using a deed he'd stolen out of a dead woman's lockbox at 2 in the morning. He lined up a buyer, a resort development company out of Asheville, $400,000. Closing was set for a Friday. I filed on Thursday. I couldn't eat that morning. I tried, sat at the kitchen table with a piece of toast and just stared at it until it went cold. My lawyer, Denise Caldwell, picked me up at 9. I wore the blouse Grandma Hattie had given me for my birthday 2 years back, the navy one with the tiny gold buttons. I don't know why that felt important. It just did. Like wearing armor made of memory. The Broward County Courthouse smelled like old paper and floor wax. My heels sounded too loud on that marble, every step echoing like a heartbeat. Denise carried the folder, thick, heavy, organized with colored tabs. The photographs of Hattie's handwritten will, the notarized affidavits, and the SD card, the one from the little painted birdhouse, the one Grandma Hattie had hidden in plain sight because she knew. Somehow, in that quiet, knowing way of hers, she knew. The probate judge was a woman named Anita Ford, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. She didn't say much. She reviewed the photographs of the will. She read the affidavit from Hattie's neighbor confirming the will had been in the lockbox. Then Denise played the footage. The room got very still. There was Marcus, clear as Sunday morning, infrared green but unmistakable. His face, his jacket, his truck in the driveway. Prying open the cabin door with a crowbar at 2:14 a.m. Walking out 7 minutes later, carrying a metal lockbox and a manila envelope. $82,000 in savings bonds and a notarized last will and testament taken from a dead woman's home before her body was cold in the ground. Judge Ford looked at me over her glasses. She didn't ask if I was sure. She froze the sale. They served Marcus at his office the next morning. His real estate office, the one with his name on the door and his face on the sign out front. I wasn't there for it. Denise told me about it later. The process server walked in during the Friday morning meeting. 6 agents sitting around the conference table with coffee, and asked for Marcus Tate by his full legal name, handed him the papers, criminal complaint for felony theft, probate challenge, immediate injunction on the property sale. Denise said nobody spoke. She said Marcus stood there holding those papers and his face just emptied, like someone had pulled a plug. The process server turned and walked out, and the only sound was the door clicking shut behind him. The resort developer pulled out within the hour, called Marcus's office and got someone else because Marcus couldn't come to the phone. Word travels fast in small-town real estate. By Monday, every agent in Broward County knew what he'd done. The brochures, the drone footage, the sport coat, all of it just made the story louder. He'd marketed his own crime scene. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot for a long time after the filing. I don't know how long. The engine was off. My hands were shaking against the steering wheel, and I couldn't make them stop. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't relieved. I was just empty. Wrung out like a rag somebody had twisted until there was nothing left. I cried. Not the kind of crying you do when you win something. The kind you do when you realize you just had to fight your own family for something your grandmother tried to hand you with love. The kind that comes from 3 weeks of watching someone carve up the last place on earth that still smelled like her, and staying silent because you had to. Because it was the only way. I sat there with my hands shaking and my eyes burning, and somewhere in the back of my mind I heard Hattie's voice, low and warm, the way it always was when she was telling me something that mattered. He built his fence, baby. He built it all by himself. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and copy toner. That's what I remember most. Not Marcus's face, not the judge's voice, the smell of that room where everything was supposed to feel resolved. Marcus stood there in a suit that didn't fit right across the shoulders, the kind you buy at a department store the morning of, because nothing in your closet feels serious enough. He said guilty the way you'd order coffee. Quietly, eyes down. Misdemeanor theft of property. Restitution of savings bonds. Payment of my legal fees. The judge asked him if he understood the terms. He nodded. That was it. No speech, no apology. No moment where he turned around and looked at me with something human in his eyes. He just signed where they told him to sign and walked out through a side door. And I sat there on that wooden bench holding an envelope with the bonds inside, running my thumb across Grandma Hattie's handwriting on the front. She'd written my name in blue ink. For Jolene when the time comes. My hands started shaking, not from anger, not from relief, because her letters leaned to the right the way they always did, and she'd pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper, and she was gone. And I was holding the last thing her fingers had touched that was meant for me. The probate judge validated the will 2 weeks later. Looked at the photographs from the cabin camera, heard the notary confirm she'd witnessed Hattie's signature, and ruled. 40 acres, the cabin, $82,000. All mine, all legal, all real. But I wasn't done. See, there's a difference between winning something and protecting it. And I kept thinking about what Marcus had seen when he looked at that land. The dollar signs, the developer's blueprints, the resort frontage. He saw a payday. And as long as that entrance parcel existed as private property, somebody, maybe years from now, maybe another cousin, maybe even some version of me worn down by time and taxes, somebody might be tempted to sell it. So I decided to take the temptation off the table, for good. I drove to the county planning office on a Tuesday morning in October, sat across from a woman named Diane who had reading glasses on a chain and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Secretary." I told her I wanted to donate a 1-acre parcel at the entrance of my property for a public nature trail easement. She looked at me over those glasses like I'd said something in a different language. "You want to give land to the county?" "Yes, ma'am." She pulled out the forms. I signed every page. 1 acre, the exact parcel Marcus had used as the centerpiece of his resort pitch, the gateway frontage he'd bragged about to the developer. Gone. Public land. Forever. And I won't pretend there wasn't a part of me that knew exactly what I was doing. I knew it would sting. I knew it would close the door on everything Marcus had schemed for. But that's not why I did it. I did it because Grandma Hattie used to walk that stretch every morning with her coffee, watching the fog lift off the ridge, and I wanted people to walk where she walked. I wanted her name on something that would outlast all of us. I had a sign made, cedar post, routed letters, sealed with polyurethane so it'd last through the weather. Hattie's Walk. I drove it into the ground myself with a post hole digger I found in the cabin's shed, and I stood back and looked at it, and I cried the way you cry when you've done something right and there's nobody there to tell. I took a photo standing next to it. I was smiling. Not gloating, the kind of smile you make when you've kept a promise no one asked you to keep. I posted it that evening, didn't tag Marcus, didn't write anything clever, just the photo and 2 words. For Grandma. I heard later, through the cousin network that still functioned like a party line, that Marcus saw it within the hour, that he sat in his car in his office parking lot and didn't move for a long time. I don't know if that's true. I don't need it to be. We never spoke again. Not at Thanksgiving. Not at funerals. Not ever. And I won't sit here and tell you that doesn't hurt, because it does. He was my cousin. We ate at the same table. We caught crawdads in the same creek behind that cabin when we were small enough for the world to still make sense. That family is broken now, and no court order is going to fix it, and no amount of being right makes the empty chair at Christmas feel like justice. But most weekends I drive up. I've replaced the porch boards, everyone. Sanded them, stained them, sealed them on my knees until my back screamed. I fixed the hinge on the kitchen screen door that had been crying out for 6 years. I left Hattie's coffee cup on the second shelf where she always kept it, the one with the chip on the rim she refused to throw away. Some evenings I sit on that porch and the mountains go purple and the air smells like pine sap and cooling earth, and it's so quiet I can hear the creek from a quarter mile off, and I swear, I hear her voice drifting through the tree line, saying what she always said when I'd leave on Sunday nights. "Go on now, baby. It'll all be here when you come back." And it is.